Start streaming. And we're live from downtown Mill Bay. Oh, and I need to email about Ruby being missing. Nope. Does anybody know where Ruby is today? Pardon? There are a lot. They're not listed on though. Nobody knows what's playing that she might be in. I will email her and her house parent and half the school. Oh no, you have to email the house parent, the assistant house parent, both BFAs, reception, health center, and the student themselves. That is technically all the people that you're supposed to email if a student is away and there's nothing on my school.
Oh yeah, I got that.
Yeah, yeah. And you yourself, because sometimes you go, I'm just at soccer, and then your house parent remembers and puts you in. It's usually your coach's fault.
And you know what's worse? When you have a sporting event that starts like 5 minutes after class starts, so you just don't go to class and then everybody gets mad at you.
It's usually not 5 minutes, though.
It is actually 5 minutes.
Lies. I've talked to enough boys where it's like, well, I had it in my sporting event, like right at the beginning of class. I'm like, your class started at 10 and your bus didn't leave till 11:15.
Like for diving, we had dismissal at 12:15.
Yeah.
The class starts at 12:10 on Saturdays. And
You got in trouble for that? Seriously?
And
Yeah,
Mr.
we did.
Pepper was diving with us, and he was our teacher.
Yeah.
And the sub didn't come in for the first 20 minutes of class.
Okay, that sounds like they just didn't like you.
And Mr. RJ.
Yeah, and then Roger just got so mad at me. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Mr. RJ got us in so much trouble.
Yeah.
Where do you guys go?
I know, right?
And then my house parent, like my dad's like, seriously, you're getting in trouble for
This
this?
is like a week ago. It was on a Saturday. Yeah, we have early dismissal again today, so now we're just going to go for 5 minutes so RJ doesn't go back.
Yeah.
Jay will come get you. Okay.
No, she's still not here.
What time does this class end? So I make sure 11:55. Okay, let's do like 20 minutes of notes to get through some. And then we'll put some of the video. We won't miss too much for those who are not here. If everyone has the right to self-determination, we want you to be able to make your own decisions and make decisions that are unique for you. So we take someone who is in fact incompetent, maybe, well, we shouldn't use as an example of someone who's in this class. How about someone who's in a class next year? Kirk.
He's not incompetent.
Well, let's go with
He can drive.
a baby. We ask the baby's like 2. They can talk basically. What do you want to do? I want to eat candy. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We give them candy. We are honoring their decision. What is the problem with doing that?
Nothing. Just say everything's candy.
Everything's candy. They don't know what's good for them. And it's not that they're making a bad decision and they're adults and they're aware of the risks, or they could be aware of the risks. They literally cannot form the idea of what the problem is with eating candy at every meal. I often think very small children, if they had the strength of adult people, most parents would be dead, because you see how angry they get when you take away their favorite thing. They're just like filled with rage, and you give them broccoli instead, and that's not nearly as good. They don't have enough information to make a good decision. So essentially, we're not making allowances for their lack of competence. if we just do what the baby says, that baby's life is probably going to be fairly short. Matches are cool. Fire is cool. That large cliff is cool.
All of those things are
Don't, you probably shouldn't crawl too near the edge of the, oh, they're gone. Well, one less.
well, natural selection.
Yeah.
It is natural selection and part of the lack of instinct of the parents to actually save their children. The next 3 months or 4 months after a child is born has often been referred to as the fourth trimester. Humans are born incredibly early compared to other animals. If we take like a foal or a calf and they're born, very shortly after being born, they can run away from wolves. Like they take off. Whereas if we take human babies, no matter how many times we throw them in the wolf pen, they don't run away. They can't move. We don't actually throw babies, obviously, into a wolf pen. But human babies are born more helpless than the average
So you're
species
saying the tests
mammal.
are flawed.
Well, they have to be born fairly early. They have, what is the evolutionary adaptation that seems to distinguish humans from other mammals? What do we have more of? We have large brains. And that has to fit through a hole about that big. And a lot of human development is restricted by the fact that that hole can't be much bigger. Humans, when you're born, your entire head is squished into a cone head. The plates on your brain itself actually squish together and overlap. That's why human babies have very soft skulls, and they actually squish together and go like this. If you've ever seen a baby shortly after it's been born, you will know that they are some of the ugliest creatures you've ever seen in your entire life. Their whole face is like, and their head's all the wrong shape, and they look terrible. They need time for everything to relax out because they've been through. Get a little baby that's been born through cesarean section. Their skulls are nice and properly shaped. They haven't been squished through the hole. If they were born later, they wouldn't be born. They would kill both themselves and their parent. Because they have to be born extremely early compared to other mammalian species. And so we rely on the fact that humans take care of them when they're in their helpless state. Why did we go down this path? Babies are incompetent. So they're even more incompetent. So it's not really natural selection. I mean, it is. Very rapidly, we'd probably have an evolutionary of less intelligent people because they would have to survive more quickly, which means you need smaller brains to still give them birth. The birth canal is about as wide as it can be for human females to still be able to walk properly and run around. If the evolutionary pressure made it even bigger, the hips would be far too wide. Already, when you undergo puberty, we have runners who if you run, you may have noticed that as your body has changed, if you are a particular gender, you stop running and you start waddling a little bit more, and you have to retrain if you want to run as fast. You look at Olympic runners, their hips haven't changed all that much. So whatever hormones they got, not a lot changed. They're still able to do that really fast sprint. It affects different people at different rates and different amounts, but it's all part of that process. The whole pelvis tilts just to be able to provide babies an escape route without killing both the mother and the baby. It's a fairly small hole. The head is the biggest part that has to make it through. Legs and arms are everything are fairly easy. Not to scare you, people have been doing this for thousands of years and they have survived. And I say that because I know apparently after one of my Biology 12 reproductive talks, I convinced all of Alex's house to never have children according to their house parents. And I had to give them another talk that it is actually relatively safe in a modern society. But yeah, there's a fair amount of things that can go wrong. But babies are particularly incompetent. We got to make allowances for their incompetence. In fact, if we do what they ask us to do, we're actually punishing them for their lack of competence. It's like malicious compliance. Oh, you want candy all the time? Sure, I don't care about you. I'll keep giving you candy until you get sick. I did know some parents. They eventually stopped But we found out that, they were sick one day and they gave them some antihistamines to make, they had seasonal allergies. And they noticed that when they gave them Benadryl, they went to sleep really fast. So their child kind of liked the effect, so they would ask for Benadryl. The parents just started giving them Benadryl every night. Conked out kids, relaxing time for parents. Oh, well, and then they realized, oh, wait a minute, we're drugging our children in order to have normal evening time to ourselves. This is probably wrong. Despite the fact they're asking for it, we are maybe developing a drug addiction in our children. This is probably not good. And they stopped doing it, and it became a story they would tell. Now their children, who are much, much older, say any problems they have in life are due to that. We don't want to punish them for the lack of competence. We still want them to make decisions, but we want them to be able to make competent decisions. We need a mechanism by which they can be provided with an aid. In the same way that we don't want people who have a physical disability being unable to enter a building. Buildings should be disability accessible. You should still be able to get to all the different floors. It may interest you to know that Rogers House is the only house on campus, I believe, that is disability certified, because you can get to every floor on a wheelchair. You actually, on the bottom floor, have to go out of the house, go down the path, up around the back on the road, up to the bridge, and then into the house. But it is technically possible. And in Privet House, it is not even technically. There's steps at every entrance. And I think every house has some floor that's inaccessible because of that. Rogers is the only one. In future areas, future houses we build will probably have elevators or some other mechanism to add this in.
You can get to the bottom floor of Privet House with a wheelchair. There's that little thing by the stairs, just like a ramp which goes off.
No, but there's the
Which-
bags up on the bags are.
Yeah, but we don't care about them.
Oh, which area? We have that door where the bags are. You can't. That didn't used to exist. We could research. You can get to there. You could come out. You could go around the house, up the hill. Oh no, you can't get up the back entrance. Yeah, you can't. Can you go to the side one and then the front? No, you can't. Yeah, no, still inaccessible.
Why can't you do the one at the surgery?
You can. How do you get to the top floor?
Yeah, you can't do the top.
Yeah, so it's not. It wouldn't be certified as wheelchair
How many house
accessible.
meetings have we had on
You have to be able to get to every floor.
Oh.
Yeah.
So all the girls' homes are already gone.
Pardon?
So all the girls' homes can't get.
Yeah, they have stairs everywhere as well. Yeah, so they're technically not. I mean, if you've ever broken your leg or been in a cast on campus, you know this campus is not very friendly at times to getting into areas. I found when I had my sprained ankle, a lot of our buttons for opening the doors don't work anymore. So you'd be at the dining hall like, let me in. I can't open the door otherwise. And it just, only certain doors work. That is not an ideal state. So in addition, like a wheelchair provides access, we want something that would provide access. How can we give someone who's incompetent an aid to make decisions? What would be the equivalent to the wheelchair? Yep. You could give them more information. They are incompetent. What if they can't read? Or understand? An aid is really good if you're already competent and you want to be informed. But you are literally incompetent. You can't understand the information you're given. That was a good try, though. Pardon?
Let them fail, but like not in a hard way. So like set them up for something.
I'll set them up for failure and just watch them do it over and over and over again.
Sooner or later, even if you're incompetent, you will learn.
Will you?
Yes.
So let them
I would
fail
say
softly.
It.
like look, we consider animals as incompetent, right?
Yeah.
If you beat a dog like 100 times, it's
Okay.
not-
Now we're beating a dog.
No, it was just an example. But like
Train a dog,
he will
let's
not-
say.
he will not come back to you
Yeah.
if you beat him 100.
Yes, that's true.
So
Well,
an incompetent animal, like animals.
yeah.
So
I do need to make a little aside. There is something called learned helplessness. If you take a dog and you beat it and you're an abusive owner, actually they may not run away. They may actually learn that they can't. And they will stay with their abuser. It's a thing you see with humans as well, whereas they learn they can't escape and they stop trying. A similar example, if you've ever seen examples of elephants doing work, like construction work. They can be tied to a small sapling, and they won't try to escape. Because when they're very young, they're tied to very strong trees with very strong chains, and they try to escape over and over and over again. And they eventually learn they can't, and then they stop trying for the rest of their lives. So the learning may be different there. To the point that they may learn some lessons would take a long time to learn. All right? Some lessons may take a long, like if you fed them candy every day, the bad health effects might take years for that to develop. Other ones is some lessons will be immediate and permanent. If you lose your leg because you've made a bad decision, that's not really learning. That would also be bad. Yeah, because little ones, sure, that would happen. Michelle.
I was just gonna say like the rat experiment where like they try and get the cheese or something.
Mm-hmm.
What it's called when they get electrocuted.
Yes, no, incompetent people still learn. This also goes to a good point. You don't completely disregard what they want, especially if an incompetent person can communicate. A lot of, in trying to adopt a non-patriarchal approach to, for example, child rearing and development, has led to ideas such as maybe we shouldn't beat our kids when they're bad. We should explore other means of feedback. We should also take their views into account. They really like sweets, and if we say no all the time, we've learned that they can develop an unhealthy obsession with sweets. We have to take into account they have views. We have to deal with them in some way, and we shouldn't just cut everything off. If they really, really don't want or do want something, that's going to affect them as well. And if they can learn, we do want to provide those opportunities. But if we allow, say, the example I always use is playing with matches. Because when I was a child, I loved matches. I've told you the story of blowing up the ditches on my family farm. I think maybe I told that one in chemistry. My parents were gone, obviously. I grew up on a farm, so we had access to gasoline. So I made a pentagram out of gasoline in the middle of our road. Like the road, but it's a gravel road, so who cares? And then I'm going to stand in the middle of it and then light it on fire so that a pentagram goes around me in fire. And I just thought that's going to be the coolest thing ever. And then I have a moment of thought because, I'm like 13, 14, so only a moment. And I realized maybe I should stand in the ditch and light it from a distance just to be safe. And then I thought, no, I'm going to light it from the center. So I did. I stood in the center. I threw a match at the gasoline, and then the ditches exploded. Because while I was making this decision, I had poured a fair amount of gasoline. The gasoline vapor is heavier than air, so it was just flowing as it was evaporating into the ditches. And if you remember when I lit off a hydrogen and oxygen balloon, and we had to evacuate the whole building? When gasoline vapor mixes with oxygen, you get a very similar effect. You've got just the right ratio, and it goes boom. When I lit that off, the ditches literally exploded. If I had been standing there, I would have been badly injured. I was not competent to realize the dangers, even at my age. I wasn't a baby. I was like 13 or 14. I could have been very badly burned for life. It was purely accident that I picked the right spot to be safest in under those conditions. The highest point where the vapors weren't actually accumulating. And ironically, I thought I was picking the most dangerous spot. So literally not competent enough to understand what I was doing.
What did your parents say?
They weren't home. I lived on a farm, and my parents weren't home. I had access to a lot of knives, gasoline, diesel fuel, which we turned into a flamethrower, and liquid nitrogen.
Did you ever tell them this story?
No. Oh, yes, I did. But I was in my 30s. So, you can't do anything anymore. I did once hear a grandma complain when two moms were complaining, like, my child's in their twos, it's awful, they can reach things now. And another one was complaining, my child's a teenager, they never listen to me anymore, they never come out of the room. And grandma piped up, is like, you should see them when they get to their 30s. They're impossible. So parents never stop being your parents. So what is you know what the solution is. What is the solution to provide them with a means to make a decision on their behalf? A proxy. Who are your proxies? your parents. You can appoint different proxies. It's a legal process. I happen to know a girl who in grade 11 at the school I went to Vanier Senior Secondary. She actually divorced her parents. The legal term's the same, whether it's marriage, and emancipated herself to be separate from them, and was given her own decision-making power. Now, because she was under 18, they didn't give her complete autonomy. She still had to check in with a social worker once a month, and she had someone who would look over her finances. She had to prove that she could live on her own, and she had a job, and she was able to afford an apartment, and she could prove all of those in court, and then her parents were divorced as her proxies. They weren't allowed to make decisions for her. For very good reasons. The story is not a pleasant one, but her determination to do that, your parents don't have to be. It's commonly assumed legally that your parents have your best interests in mind and make decisions that are good for you, not decisions that are good for them. So sending you to work as a chimney sweep to make money for your parents while avoiding all school is a decision that might be good for them. That's a decision you could challenge and say, this is not a good decision. You're making it for yourself, not for me. This is where you get the Britney Spears problem. You're supposed to be acting on a duty, not taking self-interest. Free Britney was a trending term, and Britney has finally been freed. She was under a conservatorship, which means even though she was legally an adult, a judge had appointed her dad as in complete control over all of her decisions and all of her financial decisions as if she was a child. She couldn't take out her own money if she wanted to, that she earned. She couldn't buy a house. She couldn't get into a car. She would need permission for everything. This existed for years. Conservatorships are normally used for people when they get really old. So this might be you and your parents decades from now. When grandparents can't make decisions anymore, it might be that your parents have a conservatorship over your grandparents so that they don't get scammed by people who are smooth talking.
Why couldn't she control?
Oh dear. Sometimes I forget just how young you are. See if I can get some. There was you know how celebrities go out on the town and get taken pictures of doing really stupid things at times? Not only did she do that a lot, she had at least 2 incidences, I couldn't find a thing, in which she was in a standoff with police over it. Didn't want to, and she had small children at the time. She didn't want to surrender them over to police. She wasn't competent because of the drugs she was on. She was famous very, very young and was making incredibly bad decisions. No one doubts the initial decision to put her under someone's care was a good one. It was. Since that time, she became a fairly normal mom, or as at least normal as you can be under those conditions and having that amount of money. She still performs in Las Vegas. One of the problems once you're in a conservatorship, because it's normally used for old people, they usually end when the other person dies. It's not common for you to end them. So if you're in that situation, you wanted to end it, who do you need to argue for you in court? A lawyer, yeah. Where do you get the money for the lawyer? From your conservator, who's controlling all of your money, who it turns out is paying themselves a lot of money. Her dad, it turns out, was paying himself and his family a lot of different salaries that didn't seem to be needed, and basically is spending just a lot of her money. So there's a very strong self-interest there, it was thought. And she wasn't able to get her own lawyer. The only lawyers she could get for a long time to fight for her were lawyers that were vetted and approved by her dad. And weirdly, she never won any of those. When a court finally granted her the right to get her own lawyer and was allowed to spend her money on her own lawyer, then she won the conservatorship fight and she actually managed to get rid of it. But it took a while. And these are, She was considered an incompetent person, and once you're in that state, it can be a little difficult to get out of it because you have to show that you are a completely sane and rational person. And I don't know if you've met people, but adults are not perfectly sane and rational people most of the time. Once you're in a mental hospital, trying to prove that you're not mentally incompetent can be difficult even for competent people. Have you heard of that study where a variety of different students went into a psychiatric assessment and found it at times difficult to get out? A guy, he did a study. He told a bunch of grad students, and he said, I'll come and help you get out, so you don't have to worry about it, but I want you to check yourself in. Say something like concerning, like you're hearing voices. A check-in to a psychiatric institute. And once you're there, all symptoms go away, and you just act like your normal self. And what he wanted to see was, what did the doctors write about them? And how could you prove you were competent once you were judged to be a competent state? It was also to see a bit like, what's it like for people who are mentally incompetent? Are they being treated as people? How much of their behavior? So one of the people who were in there, she was writing a diary as she did beforehand. She wrote in her diary every day. One of the things the doctors became concerned about was her obsession with writing and her obsession with writing everything down. It was classified as a part of her diagnosis of her illness. It was just her wanting to write in her diary every day. But everything you do can become diagnosed as an illness. It can be very difficult to remove that. Now, that being said, all of them eventually got out. And people have criticized the study, have said they showed up with severe symptoms. Most people don't hear audible voices talking to them during the day. If you say that's happening to you, they're going to be scrutinizing every aspect of your life and trying to figure out what's going on. And so it's normal for them to want to hold you for a while. And all of them were eventually able to discharge. But many of the things that were written down about them and their habits seem a bit odd. They would classify relatively normal behavior as being abnormal because out of context, it looks at, why are you writing things down all the time? Weird diary writing person. That's not something normal people do. Hold it. I've gone on for a long time. Do we even want 10 minutes of the show? 15 minutes? 15 minutes. 15 minutes probably enough. Oh, the link finally loaded. Do we have any more details? This has actually been one of the areas that parents collecting money of their kids. If you are from the UK and you are a child actor, they have much, much better laws about making sure the children are still in school, they still see teachers, they still have socialization. Their parents have a lot more oversight into what they're doing with the money because the UK has recognized when children make a lot of money, the parents may have too much power and their parental guardianship may be clouded by the amount of money that's being generated in their child, which is for them. Whereas in the US and Canada, that hasn't caught up. There's been far more problems where child star becomes famous, parents as proxies are in control of all the money, and then mysteriously, when they turn of age, all that money is gone. And it's just spent, and they don't have anything to show of it. But because their parent is their proxy, they did nothing legally wrong. So remember, if you ever do get into a lot of money, you may want to think about whether or not you should trust your parents.